BookTok is angry again, and this time the argument is bigger than one creator being rude or rage baity. It's about literacy, it's about critical thinking, and it's about what kinds of books go viral and what that might be doing to the way that we read. So the question is, should you be angry too? Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Raven, and today we're talking about the current BookTok drama. Specifically, the viral conversation that basically left everyone thinking, well, like, wait, am I dumb? What I think the creator got right and what they got wrong, and what this says about reading culture right now. Let's dive into it. And just so you know, I've spent a huge chunk of my life reading and analyzing literature across time periods, countries, and genres. I've studied English seriously, and I care a lot about how we interpret stories, how we talk about books, and how reading shapes the way that we think. But this isn't going to be me sitting here like I'm an expert, listen to me, blah, 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 blah. I just want you to know this is a topic that I'm passionate about, and I'm not pulling these thoughts out of thin air. Okay, with that said, let's get into what happened. So, the first thing we have to do is address the viral, like the actual video, like the viral video that set all of this off on TikTok.
I do not trust you little bitches on BookTok and your stupid Kindle Unlimited book recommendations talking about this is 5 stars, this is one of the best books I've ever read. Meanwhile, when I was 12 years old, I was reading One Direction fan fiction written by someone whose first language was not English on Wattpad, and it was still better written than half of the shit I'm seeing pushed out on BookTok. I'm gonna be the bitch and say it, some of you need to go back to a high school level literature class because the lack of reading comprehension that I am seeing is scary. Talking about Guild or whatever the fuck it's called is a literary masterpiece. Almost as if when authors are using actual literary devices and, I don't know, nuance, not spelling things out for us like we're first graders, that I see a lot of the sentiment on social media being, it was too confusing and too convoluted. Critical thinking, babes. Learn how to do it. I love a little fun romantasy vibe as much as the next girl. Like, romantasy is one of my favorite genres. However, that does not mean that it has to be poorly written. And I'm just gonna say it, not everyone should have their book published.
Okay, as you can see, right off the gate, the delivery was not it. Like, it came in hot, it came in sharp, it came in a way that sounded like it was actually talking down to people, which personally I think is not the way to go about discussions like this. But you know what? Yes, it did come across as rage baity. Actually, I feel like rage bait works sometimes. It gets clicks, it gets stitches, it gets duets, it gets engagement, and it forces people to respond. But here's the thing. Personally, I think if you want real discourse, if you want an actual conversation, especially about something like literacy and reading culture, starting rude is basically guaranteeing that the audience is going to focus on the delivery and the tone instead of the point, which is actually what happened. People weren't responding to the literacy argument, they were responding to the attitude that was in the video. And to be fair, tone matters. It always matters. Delivery matters. You can still be right and still be ineffective. You can be right and still lose the plot because you don't know how to speak to the audience you're trying to reach. Now, with all of that said, was the creator wrong? No, I don't think they were wrong. I think the point has merit. Literacy rates are declining. That is a known fact. And critical thinking is not something that we automatically keep if we stop practicing it. You don't maintain it by accident. And we need to talk about the forces behind it. 1, social media and shrinking attention spans. Social media plays a huge role, let's be honest. A lot of people literally cannot sit through more than a few seconds to a minute of content without wanting to move on. And that affects reading too. People open a book, they read a paragraph, and it doesn't hit immediately, they're out. And I'm guilty of this too. We chalk that up to mood reading. We're not in the mood to read it. And so the hook isn't just as important, it's everything. And then there's the reality that kids are not always required to read at the level that a lot of us grew up with. Like, that's just a fact. And yes, back then people still used shortcuts, Spark Notes, Wikipedia, whatever the equivalent was at the time, but the overall environment felt more competitive, more structured, more demanding. Not perfect, but demanding. And discipline has changed too. Consequences have changed, expectations have changed. And then it comes down to the parents. The home environment is huge. Literacy doesn't start and end at school, it starts at home. It's reinforced at home. It's modeled at home. When kids grow up seeing reading as normal, books around discussions at dinner, curiosity encouraged, that's a completely different foundation than growing up where reading is only a school punishment or a chore. I'm telling you, when you grow up in an environment where people talk about ideas, music, books, politics, art, you build these critical thinking skills because you're practicing it. And that's why I cared about literacy work even outside of school settings, because supporting parents and family matters. If you want kids who read deeply, you have to build a culture that makes room for reading. Okay, that was a lot. But we've named the problem, right? The problem: literacy struggles, attention span collapse, and a culture that constantly speeds up. But how does that connect to BookTok specifically? Let's be real. BookTok rewards instant gratification. It rewards the fastest emotional payoff. It rewards the most instantly marketable pitch. Enemies to lovers, one bed, touch her and you die, morally gray man, shadow daddy. You know. And here's the issue. Tropes are not automatically bad. Tropes actually can be fun. They can be comforting. But when the trope becomes the only thing that we're evaluating, we stop talking about the writing. I see this all the time. In the past, long-form storytelling asks you to build patience. Now, everything is built around the hook. And I'm not saying hooks don't matter or they didn't matter then. When you wrote an essay, you put the thesis early. When you write a story, you create interest early. But right now, the hook has to be one sentence and it has to hit immediately or you don't give it a chance. People don't give it a chance. It's just out of their minds. So books get pushed that are optimized for quick consumption. You see the problem here? And at the same time, this is important. There are people craving long form again, hence things like YouTube. There's a rise in newsletters, in Substack, in journaling, in slow living, and people just wanting thoughtful commentary. People want to feel like they're not just consuming, they want to digest. So we have two trends happening at once: speed brain content and slow brain hunger. Isn't that cute? I came up with that one myself. Now, let's get to the spicy parts, right? We have the books. I'm going to say this very carefully. A book being popular does not automatically mean it's well written, as Shorty said. And a book being simple does not automatically mean it's badly written. What I mean when I say poorly written is usually some combination of weak sentence structure or repetitive phrasing, flat character development, plot that looks like copy and paste, like it's generated from a checklist, dialogue that doesn't sound like real people, a story that relies on tropes to do all the emotional work instead of like writing to earn it. An example of this for me is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. This checks off all the boxes for me. The sentence structure is very poor. It's very weak. There's a ton of repetitive phrasing. There's a flat character development. There are plot holes, but the plot felt very copy and paste to me. And from what I hear, she's like the queen of twists and everything, but that's become her gimmick. It's really her checking off a checklist every single time she sits down and puts pen to paper, or really fingers to keyboard. And listen, simplicity can be powerful. Let me say that. It can be powerful. A simply written book can destroy you emotionally if it's written with intention. A complicated book can be beautifully written and still miss it because it's so obsessed with sounding smart that it forgets to tell a story. And so it's not simple equals bad or complex equals good. It's about whether the craft supports the experience. An example like this for me that I genuinely love is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. It's a simply written book, but it's incredibly powerful. It's telling a story of two people that hated each other, experienced this really traumatic thing with one another and ended up being brought together, being soulmates, being like one another's person. And it's such a heartbreaking, traumatic story, told simply but done incredibly well. And yes, there are book talk staples that come up a lot in this conversation, right? For dark romance, we have titles like Once You're Mine and Haunting Adeline that gets brought up constantly. My cat. Yeah, so then we have fantasy romance like ACOTAR, right? A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I actually think gets better as it develops, but it's part of the discourse. Then we have romance like It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and then thrillers like The Housemaid, like I just said. But these books go viral because they're extremely accessible. They're easy to pitch, they're easy to binge, they're easy to react to give you the wow factor in the videos, the book talk videos that a lot of people create. And when the reaction becomes the point, when being part of the conversation becomes the point, we stop asking deeper questions. It's just a fact. But to be fair, originality is complicated. Artists sample. Musicians build from older melodies. Writers borrow structure, themes, archetypes. Inspiration is normal. Not saying that it isn't, but there's a line between inspiration and lazy repetition. So what do we do now? Here's what I think. Again, just my opinion. I think we should be more intentional about what we consume. We should practice critical thinking on purpose. We should challenge ourselves to notice themes like politics and power inside stories instead of waiting for someone online to summarize it for us. That then creates discourse. We can have conversations based off of your view on something and based off of my view on something. We can then have real conversation when something sparks your interest. It's like, it's not just don't like and save, let's talk about it. And yes, always, of course, regardless of what I'm saying and what that book talker was saying, read whatever you want. But read what you want is not the point. The point is, don't call something top tier, just because the vibes are good and everyone else said it's good. Be able to explain why it worked for you. Be able to explain what the writing did, what the character arc did, what the plot earned. Because if we want better books, we have to get better at explaining books, at talking about books. And if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. Tell me why. I would love to have a conversation, but tell me with an actual argument. Let's talk about it. All right. I know that was a mouthful, but if you like this video, like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you think BookTok is helping reading culture, hurting it, or both at the same time? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.